Last week we talked about, it's unfair, God. This week, we're going to ask the question, why me? I'm going to ask Caleb, I'm going to pick on Caleb a minute. Caleb, can you come up here? I don't know if you noticed, but Caleb has been our young drummer at various times, and sometimes he's on his own, and sometimes he has Mike to help him out. But this is a young man who is developing some skills that he will grow into. And he's willing at the right age of 9, is that right? You're going to be 10 pretty soon though, aren't you? No? At 9 years old, he knows where he wants to go and that he wants to play drums. I'm right, aren't I? You want to play drums? Yeah? And he wants to be good at it. And he knows that in order to do that, there's some training and there's some shaping and there's some molding and some developing that's going to take place in this young man's life. And oftentimes, I bet if he's like me, there's going to be in his life when he's going to say, why me, God? Why didn't you give me this ability right away? Why didn't you make it possible for me to right away be able to play the drums? Or sing the songs? Or be the athlete? Or be the business person? Or be well known? Or be recognized? Somewhere along the way we're going to ask that question, why me? But then God's going to say, I'm taking care of that. And He's going to keep taking care of that. So I want you, every time you see this young man playing the drums, to recognize what a gift God is putting in his life and in our life in the church. Can you do that?
Yes.
I know you can. Thank you, Caleb, for letting me utilize you. Why me? You know, it does seem a bit unfair sometimes for that whole idea of why me to happen. And this is not working. Well, we'll just do it out. Paul, early in the text this morning, expresses that somehow the people are asking the question, why me? Why is it that my life is not going so well? Why is it if God is so loving and so wonderful and He molds and shapes our lives, why is it that right now in my life things are not going like I really want them to go? And we tend to throw those wonderful pity parties because life is just not rolling along the way that we assumed it ought to roll along. And so we go, why me, God? Why me? And then we realize that in the Old Testament, Jeremiah says that God is the potter. And He's got all of us as clay on this potter's wheel, and He's molding and shaping us. And we're thinking, okay, God, what's the deal? If you're molding and shaping us, we have no power, we have no ability to decide for ourselves whether we're going to be honorable or dishonorable. Whether we're going to be good or bad. We're just left on this wheel of fortune called the potter's wheel, called God's potter's wheel, and we just have to wait and see what we become. When I look back at the Old Testament book of Exodus, I think of Pharaoh. And I remember as a kid reading the story of the Egyptians having bondage over the people of Israel and how God called Moses to set the people of Israel free. And He said to Moses, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And all throughout that whole Exodus event, all the way to the crossing of the Red Sea, we're reminded in the Scriptures that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. I thought, man, Poor Pharaoh. If anybody could say, why me? It's Pharaoh, right? Because he's stuck being a very dishonorable, bad person because God was molding and shaping him to be that way. Then another person came to my mind in the New Testament, and that person was Judas. Judas was the disciple to destruction, and Jesus says in John 17, in his prayer to the Father, he says, I've saved, I've kept track of all whom you have given me, except for the one, namely Judas. It's like, wow, poor Judas. There's a poor me person. Poor Judas gets stuck being the bad guy. What I've discovered is a truth about Pharaoh and Judas and others who become the bad instruments, is that it was their free choice and their choosing to say to the God who molds and shapes, I do not want to be on your wheel of fortune. I want to create my own wheel of fortune. I want to be something. So I'm going to spend my life on my own, working towards becoming something. Pharaoh really liked the idea of being a god, so that all the people of Egypt would worship him. You know, the 10 plagues of Exodus were plagues against the various gods that the people of Egypt worshipped. And the last plague, the plague of the firstborn of every family being killed, was a plague against the worship of Pharaoh, because even Pharaoh lost his oldest son. Wow. You see, Pharaoh wanted so much to be something in the world that he was going to do it all on his own. And the more he followed and was captivated by the sin of his heart, the more hardened God allowed him to become. And the more hardened he became, the more resistant he was to God's will. And even though he was powerfully resistant to God's will was still accomplished by him, because God was going to get the job done. By the way, that's the same thing with Judas. Judas was so determined that Jesus was supposed to be an earthly king, he was supposed to defeat the Romans, that he was going to force Jesus into a situation to do just that. And when Jesus was not able or was not willing, able according to Judas, willing according to those of us who know him, when Jesus was unwilling to falter and follow Judas's direction, Judas continued to get hardened and hardened and hardened to the point of receiving 30 silver coins to have Jesus arrested. That deals with the hardening part. But you know, it still doesn't answer the question that we might ask from time to time, why me? Why me? Now, it may be that part of that pity party is we have been spending much of our life trying to become something. We've spent much of our life trying to become something in the eyes of either our parents, something in the eyes of our friends, something in the eyes of our peers, our classmates. We're working so hard to be somebody or something that we find ourselves going, why me? There's a person in the Old Testament who said, why me? His name was Job. He was throwing a long pity party all the way from chapter 1 of Job, actually chapter 2 of Job, all the way to chapter 38. Job was very bothered by the fact that he worked his life to be a righteous man. He was a wealthy, righteous man. He honored God. He obeyed God. He prayed for his children. He did all the things that a righteous man would do. And yet, all of these things that he had in life was taken away. His children, his wealth, even his health. And there he was, sitting on a pile of ash or dung, and just grieving and saying, "Why me, God?" And of course, he had 3 friends who tried to help him out with good theology, or the theology of the day. That didn't work. And then along came Elihu, who was a young man thinking, "Well, I've got this theology together because I just got out of seminary." He didn't help out either. So Job was still waiting anxiously. "God, why me? Talk to me. Talk to me." Why me? It may be in our lives that for one reason or another, we're asking the question, why me? Why is it that I can work so hard and still be so in debt? Why is it that I can love so much and not be loved much? Why is it that relationships for me do not last? Why is it that the family around me is a struggle? Why is it that life at my work, or my job, is so difficult? Why is it that I'm not the athlete that I really wanted to be? Why is it that everybody else seems to be much smarter than me? Why me, God? Why me? Am I trying too hard? Am I working too hard at being somebody or something? It may be. That it may be that God wants us to see that He has us on this wheel, this pottery wheel, this wheel of His fortune, because He wants to shape and mold us to be something for Him. So what we really need to be asking is, Lord, what is it that you want me to be? What is it that you're shaping me to be? And how can I begin that process to live out the person, the individual you're wanting me to be? How is it possible that we as a church can begin to live out the church that you've called us to be and that you want us to be, that you're shaping us to be? And the way that we go about doing that is to listen to His Word, to pay attention to His Word, and to realize that God in His grace, God in His forgiving love, sent Jesus into the world to show us that He cleanses and forgives us, and He keeps us moistened on that wheel so that we can be constantly changed. We can be constantly formed. We can continually grow up. We can continually mature in our faith. We can continue to be developed into the person and into the people God desires us to be. That God is saying to us, it all happens because every time you want to step off that wheel and do your own thing, I keep bringing you back before you get too hardened by your sinful life. You get too hardened by the world around you. I keep pulling you back, putting you on the wheel, and putting on the salve of my love and my forgiveness, which comes through the blood of Christ that cleanses us from all of our sins. I put you on my wheel of fortune so I can keep shaping and molding you. Yes. We, the crazy clay, jump off the wheel of fortune and start doing our own thing. And God, in His magnanimous love, keeps taking us back, putting us on the wheel to reshape us and to remold us. So I want to get back to Job for just a minute. Job was asking, why me, why me, why me? He wanted an answer. When God speaks to him in Job chapter 38 verse 2 and Job chapter 40 verse 7, he says to Job, put on your man clothes for battle. Another way of saying that is put on your big boy pants. And in fact, what God is saying to Job, I'm going to answer you. I need you to be prepared for the answer, because the answer I give to you is going to be something where you have to be prepared to manage the results. And it is not going to be easy. And here's the answer he gives to Job. I'm God. Who are you? You keep trying to be more than who you are. I'm God. And with that, I am with you at all times. It does not matter whether you're experiencing great times or down times. It does not matter whether life has got you in a rut or you're really going. I am God. I am shaping you. I am with you. Now the crazy thing is, he does not tell him or give him an answer for why me. He doesn't say, Job, the reason why I'm doing this with you or this has happened to you is because. He doesn't do that. What he does do is something he does for all of us. He reaches down, he says, I'm listening. And then he says, I'm not going to give you all the answers, but I'm going to let you know. You don't have to go through life on your own. You're not by yourself. I sent my Son to die on the cross for you so that you can be a forgiven child of God. And I've got you on my wheel of fortune that shapes you and molds you, so that even though from the point of view of other people you may already have life together and you're fully shaped, you will know that that full shape and form that I want you to be will be finally with me in heaven. So, why me? Who knows? God knows. But He wants us to continually to grow in our faith and confidence in His loving presence. I want to close with this illustration. Have you ever met someone in your life that appears to be so ardent in their life, they're done? You know, they're so hard in their life that it's impossible. There's no changing them. They are that way. In the 1400s, 1464, I believe, a person by the name of Alfonso, he was I think not Alfonso, anyway, he was the student of Donatello, the sculptor. And he was assigned the task of sculpting King David. After a bit of time, he did a little bit of work, somewhat chiseling away the area of the legs. He quit. So, a few years later, another young sculptor was assigned the task. This sculptor said, I'm not doing this. This marble is useless. One thing, it's already been chiseled on. it's not my work that started. And the other thing, this really is not a quality piece of marble for this spectacular statue that I can create, I can sculpt. 31 years after the first assignment, it was now assigned to Michelangelo at the age of 26. Michelangelo took this marble that was not a very good piece of marble. He took this hardened stone that had already been chiseled on and worthless, and he turned it into what is known today as the greatest sculpture piece of art that you could view. Originally, this art was supposed to be placed upon the roof of the Florence Cathedral, but it was so big, it was placed in the center of the town in Florence. Michelangelo took something that couldn't be and made it what it was. So if somehow we've given up on God, the potter, I want you to know he's a great sculptor too. He can chisel away the same as he can form and shape. God grant that for Jesus' sake. Amen. Pray with me.